course, wrapping up what is known in the country as Women's Month, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. And we are continuing here on the channel with our coverage of profiling women who are doing great things in their respective fields. Now, August, of course, is dedicated to celebrating and paying tribute to thousands of women who marched to the union buildings in protest against the extension of past laws to women 65 years ago. Now, as part of paying tribute to women who are making a difference, I'm joined now by the ANC's Treasurer General, Dr Gwen Ramokgopa, just to reflect a bit. Dr Ramokgopa, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. One of your colleagues, former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, was reflecting at the African, at the Women in National Unity gathering that took place, saying we need that similar platform, actually, where women gather, pretty much like the Government of National Unity, and advance the cause of all South African women, saying that this is something that certainly, as the ANC, a progressive party with progressive gender policies, you should lead. What is your thought around the formation of a Women in National Unity?
Thank you very much, Abut Tabo, and also good evening to viewers and listeners. It is important that as we reflect on the 68 years of that march by these courageous, formidable women, 20,000 of them, to mark this legacy by asking ourselves what we can do today to respond to today's contradictions, to today's inequalities, and to also the need to really have women at the forefront of taking us to the next level in terms of inclusive growth of our economy. Indeed, I agree with our sister, our previous Deputy President, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, that the GNU commitment to a national dialogue must also include how we can create a society where no one is left behind, and where, in the words of Charlotte Maxeke, men can acknowledge that women must also stand side by side with them to advance our country, and that women also are able to acknowledge their responsibility and duty to the nation to advance. I must hasten to say that women have really been pushing hard, and we've had very capable women like Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. We've had many women ministers as well, many women in the corporate sector and in the civil society organizations really standing firm, including even in previously conservative institutions like traditional leaders, like faith-based leaders. Women are emerging to execute their responsibility to nation building. And it would be proper that the dialogue around women involvement and women affirmation should also be taken as part of the national dialogues around GNU.
30 years on, when we reflect and you look at all the parties in our system in South Africa, I mean, now we're, of course, talking about new political parties. There are plenty, there are lots of political parties. It's a noisy space, especially the space of politics. But are all the parties on board as far as having the right policies for women, or is there an opportunity there for improvement?
Most definitely there's an opportunity to improve. In the ANC, for instance, which is the party I belong to and I'm privileged to lead, over the years, especially during the anti-apartheid struggle, we emphasized that the matter of gender inequality is an integral challenge that the struggle for freedom must also resolve. Yes, we were to resolve the struggle against racism, but also against marginalization and oppression and exploitation of women. We even said that the African women bear the triple oppression, as well as the issue of inequalities in society in general, what we characterize as class disparities. So this was one of the social problems that we were to resolve in our struggle for freedom. So post 1994, 30 years down the line, I think the ANC has really advanced. We have not only adopted policies to affirm women, we have institutionalized such policies within the Constitution. So it's a constitutional obligation to ensure that there is parity for women representation. So the other parties still have a long way to go. And we experienced that when we were having negotiations around the government of national unity. And that is why we have also lowered the representation of women. It's because the parties, other parties that came on board, did not have that as an obligation on their side to ensure that women are represented. We don't doubt that some of the men can actually be progressive to affirm women and ensure women are also empowered during their programs. But the important issue is that women must also be represented so that their voices are heard as well, because it's very difficult for men only to articulate the needs of women. And that is why the issue of parity, we ensured that it is a constitutional obligation. You've also noticed that we are struggling to have a 50-50% representation of women as premiers in provinces. And also to deal with that, we then have a resolution of the NEC that where the premier is a man, then the speaker must be a female and the MECs must be 60-40 in favor of women. Because by now we have many capable women that can take up leadership responsibilities. So all of us, it is our responsibility as political parties and other institutions in the private sector, in the faith-based sector, in traditional leadership institutions, everywhere we need to take academia, we need to take responsibility that we don't leave the girl child behind, we don't leave women behind, and that women also assert themselves. We really encourage that the schooling system has produced equity in terms of access to education for both boys and girls. We also don't want our boys to be left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. The president, having engaged civil society and community members, particularly on the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, would have held a summit and would have held subsequent summits thereafter. And something came out of that called the Integrated National Strategy Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And every time we speak about this and its pillars, one of the pillars that come up is one of economic empowerment. And there are some who are very critical of the government of the ANC around, for example, the funding that would have been allocated for that. It was 21 billion at some time. I don't know where it's sitting now. To say they are not really beginning to see where that money is going. And many are cautioning the ANC to say don't end up having one of those situations where you've got good intentions and a good national strategic plan that is never implemented.
I would agree with the concerns that are there. Fortunately, our constitution promotes and mandates a participatory democracy. There is commitment through the plan for empowerment of women and gender equity to ensure that, amongst others, 40% of state procurement benefits women, or women become beneficiaries. Whichever office I occupy And this is also what we have done as African National Congress lately. We have strengthened the monitoring and evaluation systems and processes to ensure that we track policy implementation, we track also resources allocation. We as a society must be vigilant. We must not only leave it to those that are in government or those that are in leadership like ourselves to represent our interest. We need to be participatory. And that is why the establishment of a council or a commission to ensure that the inputs are continuous from women and that also the monitoring is strengthened, not only through the Ministry of Women, Youth and People, persons with disability, but also from women who are the motive forces, who stands to benefit. I want to honor one of our esteemed legendary women who passed on a few years ago, Dr. Namani Mahau, who had also helped develop instruments to monitor the empowerment of women. And such projects were entered into with institutions like the University of Pretoria, and that's also one of her contributions in the monitoring of the gender strategy.
Yeah.
So we need to strengthen the participatory first, the monitoring, and also advocacy. It is not time to sit back.
Yes.
This is a time to consolidate as we deal with the issue of economic empowerment and to undermine the gender-based violence.
So you're saying you're tracking some indices, and how are you registering on the Black woman industrialist timeline and deliverables?
Yeah, I think that issue of women, Black industrialists in particular, is an area that we engaged with the previous Minister of Department of Trade and Industry and Competitions, Minister Patel, and we know that we had a summit just before elections where he gave a report. We're still very, very backward in terms of that. So we want to encourage women in that sector. This is one area that we will have engagements, dialogue, and colloquia on. We are also establishing think tanks through the Progressive Business Forum with women in various sectors so that we can strengthen and even fast track the processes of Black industrialists. You know, sometimes when you talk about Black this, Black that, people become impatient or think that it is, we're taking them back. Why don't we just say generic? We must realize that if Black people are 80% of the society, and we don't focus specifically on that 80% being at the forefront of pulling this wagon of success, we are unlikely to succeed. So this affirmative action is critical so that all of us, we create a bigger cake so that there is shared prosperity. So that's one area that we're focusing on. Another area is women in artificial intelligence and the digital economy, women in finance, and women also in technology. These are critical areas in the space of one of the three priorities that the GNU identified. The most critical one, the issue of fast-tracking our progress towards inclusive growth.
So while we're there, what is your reflection on the now? Of course, by the end of the month, it will be a done deal. The judiciary being led by a female Chief Justice. Wow,
we are celebrating. We started celebrating when she was a nominee. First, when Justice Maya was appointed as a deputy Chief Justice of the country. I was really honored to be in one of the conferences of judges at UNISA last year. I know this year they've also held that kind of a session. And we wished her well. And we also wished her success in becoming the first woman Chief Justice. Well, a bit late, but we must celebrate. I mean, it's like some of us. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be a big deal that there's a woman Treasurer General of the ANC, but we must acknowledge that it is a breakthrough. Yeah. It's the first time in over 100 years that this liberation movement has a woman in this position, and also has 3 women in the top leadership. So in the justice system, we must celebrate that one of our competent, dedicated judges is now the Chief Justice of our country. We wish her well. We will respect her, and we know that she has everything to succeed. But we also want to acknowledge that we need more and more to follow her. Yes. As she had broken the so-called glass ceiling, which I actually say to many that these ceilings don't exist in real life. You'll find that these are just created to intimidate or to limit our ability to make breakthroughs. So the younger generation knows that it's possible. Yes. So more and more women come through.
Interesting that you bring that up, because that would have been my next question. Would it be fair criticism? Others are saying, well, it's good and well Dr. Gwen is celebrating herself, Nomvula Mokonyane, and being part of the NEC. But are they really leveling the playing fields? Are they removing the obstacles in the playing field? Or is it just always going to be the women with legacy, who've got struggle credentials, who are going to occupy these spaces? Where are the young ones who are coming up?
Earlier on in May, we had a Mother's Day event where we also reflected on the various generational experiences. And one young lady who also happens to be a leader in the ANC Youth League, but working in the corporate sector, stood up and said, you know, there are just too many obstacles. It's as if we are not recognized for who we are. So there are still challenges that these platforms of intergenerational dialogue help to unearth what else should we tackle. But there were many other women who stood up and said that they wouldn't be leaders in their own companies if it were not of the policies that have created an enabling environment, and where they also have got redress should there be any problems with discrimination. But one reflection that Zanele Mbeki made is that there are also areas of regression. For instance, she decried the fact that at the JSE, women representation has declined. So this says to us that even though some women have advanced, there are still obstacles. So younger women must also mobilize themselves. We must be available to support them to deal with what they are facing today. And those that are ahead, as Charlotte Maxeke has always said, lift as you rise. We need to lift one another. And platforms of dialogue like were held yesterday by the ANC Gender Subcommittee are very critical to identify what other obstacles are still there and whether there are areas of regression, so that through vigilance we can be able to identify such and mobilize society to deal with them.
And finally, of course, we've touched on civil society, we've touched on government, we've touched on business, traditional leadership, maybe you can even speak about religious leadership. Certainly, there is some urging that needs to happen in some of these sectors and some call to action. And how would you say work there needs to be advanced?
We think the call to action is mainly around the issue of economic inclusion, both from a basis of participation, that women must not be left behind, but also from the basis that it makes economic sense for women to participate, given that there are almost 50%, sometimes even more, in certain sectors of society. So it is important that women participate directly to fast track the advancement of our society. Secondly, that we need to invest more on scientific interventions, both social science and also other sciences, like from the public health perspective, from security perspective, and so forth, from criminal studies and all that, to understand how we can break the back of gender-based violence and femicide. It is one barrier that really incapacitate women to contribute to their own self-advancement and advancement of society. And thirdly, it is also a call to action for women to break the silence where there are barriers, to raise them, to organize themselves with others, different platforms. We will have the Progressive Women's Movement as well, which is multi-party, multi-sectoral, and many other platforms in the industry, in faith-based sectors, in civil society, in government as well, so that we together can be able to be a formidable voice to ensure that gender parity is achieved. We should not leave men behind. It should be understood that women cannot carry it alone. If you look at the participation in this 2024 elections, over 50% of those registered were women. And of those that were registered to vote, over 60% of those that actually voted were women. So we're also calling on men to appreciate that they also have to participate optimally side by side with women. That's why we say gender equality, gender parity. Let's not forget the boy child, because if we pull the boy child and the girl child together, we can undermine these disparities and inequalities, including GBVF,
yes,
in their lifetime.
Dr. Gwen, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on this evening. Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa
Thank you very much, and wish all women well in this month.